Welcome back to the Culture Based Podcast. I'm Dustin. He's Blake. We are in the third part of the Are You Scalable series. It's been so much fun. May 7th. We are in the month of May now. We can't wait to spend this time with y'all today, walking through some of these, what we're calling unscalable cultures. But before we get into that, I want to remind you that we're here to help leaders know what they're about, show where they're going, and develop a scalable team to get them there. If you're listening on audio podcast platform, thank you so much for tuning in. We would love for you to leave a 5-star rating and review. Help us get this content out further to those who could benefit from it, just like yourself. Feel free to share this episode with your friends, anybody in your network that you feel like could benefit from it. If you're watching on YouTube, hello there. We're so glad that you're here. We'd love for you to hit the thumbs up button. That's the like. If you're new to social media, that's what that means. Thumbs up means like. Heart means love. There's no hearts, though, in YouTube land. That's sad. But just go ahead and give us a thumbs up anyway. We'll be happy that you did. Subscribe and ring the bell. You got something to say about thumbs and hearts?
Yeah, actually, I just heard today that YouTube started off as a dating site. So it's crazy there's no hearts.
Woo.
Yeah.
Maybe they did a hard pivot away from the hearts just so that no one thinks they're trying to find their new match.
Yeah.
Based off of somebody's video on how to make brisket. how we got there, but they did it.
Oh, well.
They pivot. We need to do a deep dive into that someday, but not today. Anyway, you can find us on social media as well, and all the usual suspect places of Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook at The Culture Base, BASE. You can find us online at theculturebase.com. While you're there, click on the strategy button for a free 30-minute strategy session with us on any of these topics that we are discussing. All right. Boom, boom, boom. We went through it. Let's get into it. I didn't mean to rhyme, but it was on time. All right. Over the past couple of weeks, we've introduced the question, are you scalable? And we discussed there are a few defining factors for scalability, but the most important is your team, including the formula that allows you to determine your team's scalability. So pause right there for a second. If you have not listened to last week's episode on the formula, we will recap it here in just a moment. But it may be worth your time to go back and listen to that full episode as well as we continue through this series. So over the next few weeks, we're going to lay out some examples of different organizations and how that formula determines their scalability.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great segue. I was like, all right, he's rolling, man. I'm
having a good time listening. He goes,
I love being a consumer of what you're always
of your own podcast. He goes,
and then I'm like, what are they going to say?
Like fun.
That's me.
Sounds like a fun podcast. Ooh, I'm so glad I'm just settled in here with my blanket and tea.
Oh, man. So obviously last week we talked about like how not every data point in the formula is the exact same, but that there are some variables that are creating a baseline for who you are as an organization and other ones that are multipliers of what your organization can do. And all of that works together to give you a likeliness percentage of scalability, right? And so on this episode, we're talking about unscalable cultures, right? And when we say culture, we're talking about the environment of your organization, the standards of your organization, the things you don't allow, the things you allow. And all of that works together to create an environment of whether you're going to be able to scale. So let's hit the formula. The formula, creating the base, is the right people connected to the right work with the right clarity on the purpose. So that creates this baseline model of which we're going to now multiply by the environment that supports growth and development. So do you have the things in place to help your baseline grow and scale? And then also we're going to multiply by the percentage of accountable communication. Okay. So are you holding standards? Do you have the right standards in place? Are your KPIs clear to everyone? And how are we growing as a team walking through those accountable numbers and measures? So that's the formula. What we're doing today as we dive into these unscalable culture types, what we're going to actually talk about is how does that equation play with these with these types, right? Like, what are they scoring? How did they score? How does their, we talk about the right people. How did their right people section hit? How did their clarity on purpose section hit? And working through that, and we're not going to read all the numbers. I feel like that's like reading you guys our tax return, which sounds like super exciting until it's like obviously not. So we're going to spend time though giving you high level, like here's where they're strong, here's where there's not, here's where that if they just increase this a little, their scalability would grow by 10%. So that's what this is. What do you got here?
Nothing other than, since you just subliminally dropped it, we can just say that you can buy Uncultured by Blake Bear on Amazon today.
Yeah. Accidental product placement there.
Yeah. I'm for it though. It's good integration. All right. So we're going to cover 3 unscalable types today, as long as time allows. And they are, we decided to give them names so that when you think about these descriptor titles that we're giving these unscalable cultures, that you immediately can go, yeah, I've been there, or I've seen that, or I've had a friend that kind of went through that, or I came out of that, or maybe I'm in it right now. Really easy identifiers for you. And so the ones that we're going to cover today, we're calling chaos, foggy, and theater unscalable cultures. So let's get into it first with this, what we're calling chaos culture. So we've all, I think, even though we haven't maybe necessarily been in these unscalable cultures, we can definitely resonate with some of the things that are in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of give you just a brief description of each one, and then we'll kind of break down why they are scalable in some areas and why maybe they are a little bit low in other areas. So chaos culture, right? Everything changes with the leaders focus shifting constantly. It's disguised as vision, right? I got a big vision, but it have a little bit of shiny object syndrome is what we call it. There's not many repeatable processes or even meeting agendas. There's a complete lack of data. They are really, really great at starting, but they're really terrible at finishing. So there are pros and cons to each of these unscalable cultures, because if there were no pros at all, then they wouldn't exist. Yeah. People would just be like, well, this isn't working. Let's get rid of this completely. And so some pros for this chaos culture, like I said already, is there's some high vision. I'm doing air quotes for those who aren't watching us on YouTube. There's some high vision excitement, right? It's really great for startups. It's usually has a kind of like a big personality at the helm, right? Every day feels fresh. There's some really good initial motivation. You probably know the right things to do, but you might not necessarily have the power or the people to change those things. They usually have a very hungry operations, or what we refer to in the EOS system as an integrator person who's walking through those processes, but they are the walking process. It's not documented anywhere. It's just like, where's Bill? We need Bill always, right? If there's a meeting with Bill not in it, then it's not a good meeting. And if Bill is in it, then afterwards he needs a therapy session. You want to walk through some of the cons? Want to walk through some of the quick cons for us, Blake?
Yeah. So little gets done. Like it feels like a lot's getting done because everything's up here in an urgency feeling, but little is actually getting done. You don't have consistency. You have a burnout due to results. We've talked about burnout before, coming from, what your support looks like and what your self-care looks like. But the third part was, what are the results? Like, people are connecting to purpose and the vision of something. And if they're not connecting, big problem here. So the people are having burnout from this one item. You got a lack of confidence, confusion, no sustainable processes, no quality control, right? Quality control is probably just the leader feeling like something works or doesn't work, or like, hey, that's not what I wanted. Why'd you do it that way? Like, that's it. Like, that's how someone responds to their quality control. High expenses, they're reactive to customers. Customer-driven complaints are a means to mold the culture at an extreme level. Okay, customer-driven complaints are the means that mold the culture. They're not driving the culture. They're allowing their customer base to respond to create that. So it's completely reactionary in its nature. And your ops and your integrator, if you're an EOS person, they're just getting burnt out. And as soon as they do leave, big issue, because then you're going to have a visionary who doesn't have focus trying to own all that.
Yeah. So if we get back to our formula, I'll pop it back on the screen again. As we're walking through these unscalable cultures, we want you to understand how this formula plays out in these cultures. So we kind of given you a broad stroke description, some pros and cons of the chaos culture, but let's dive a little bit deeper into this just for a few minutes, and why when we go through this formula, we can see a score at the end of their likelihood of scalability. So we always start with the right people, right? And so when we looked at this, we're like, okay, this company, like we said, high vision, high excitement. That probably means they attract people really well, because who doesn't love high vision and high excitement? The problem here in their having the right people and holding on to those right people is that their turnover percentage is probably pretty high, because as soon as that shininess wears off and begins to fade, then people really understand, like, I can't work like this. And so the turnover rate is pretty high.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're attracting from just based off, do people have drive? They're going to say someone's a right person because, they're driven. And so they're actually like filtering it completely by, do they fit our pace? Not, do they have the right stuff? So that's one of the, and they still, I think they still hit pretty high, but like you said, their turnover's trash. The next thing we would look at is like the will. Are they connected to the work? And the will being that acronym we talked about last time, the want, the instinct, the love, and the leverage. And their will is actually pretty high here. I would say they're pretty mid on their people, but their will, they're really leveraging the story of what they're trying to do, right? Like, even though they may have like shiny object syndrome, a lot of times that has to do with how they think they're going to get there, but they keep pivoting on that stuff. It doesn't mean that there still isn't a high level mission or vision they're going for. It's just that they don't know how to get there, so they continue to pivot, and then they end up, Dustin, you always say what, the coffee house that serves pizza or something like that.
Yep.
That's what they end up becoming.
Yep. Yeah. And so we get people, we got will or connected to the right work, and then we have right clarity on purpose. That's the beginning kind of baseline for our formula, right? That we're adding those three numbers together. And so they're pretty mid on people. They're doing pretty decent on the will, right? And connecting people to the work. But now we get into the vision. Do they have the right clarity on their purpose? And so again, another acronym, why not, that we use for here on vision is, are they clear on vision? CLEAR, communicated, lasting, exciting, actionable, and relevant. Obviously, communicated, you could kind of go either way here. It's probably initially communicated, and there's some exciting possibilities, but it's a bit of an overshare, and so their communication sometimes can suffer from that. It's not that lasting, because again, shiny object syndrome, it fades quickly, but it is super exciting. And at first it can be actionable. The problem here on the last letter of R, is it relevant, is that when you have a big personality, high vision person at the helm, that they can often get their head so stuck in the clouds, right, Blake, that they don't really see the relevancy of the vision anymore. They're just so married to it, and they're like, no, this has to be it. This has to be it. This has to be it. And everybody's going, that was it 10 years ago. It's not really it anymore. And so because of that, again, you kind of take some highs and some lows here in this vision piece, and they're kind of in the middle there as well.
Yeah. So those three create our base. Then we get into the multipliers. So their environment. What's their environment like? It's not a horrible environment. Not great, but it's not in the red, I wouldn't say. Like, when you're looking at how long it takes to train people, my guess is a long time. It takes a real long time to train them, because you're not clear on your processes. You're not clear on your and you're constantly
moving target.
Exactly. But then are they, like, do their people feel connected to the team? Is there a spirit of safety? Like, some of these things you feel like you're hitting high, but man, when processes aren't clear and followed, and there isn't a coaching process to their people, people aren't going to feel totally safe in their environment. And so that is going to put them pretty middle when it comes to their environment. So probably like a 1.5, 1.6. We love those 0.6ers.
Yeah. And so do we want to give Blake the numbers kind of that we were thinking on the first bit of these, or no?
I mean, on the environment and accountable communication, probably.
Right. Okay. So we're kind of mid there on the first piece. We're mid on environment. Now we're getting into our last, really, it's our last multiplier. It's the percentage of accountable communication, the percentage of effectiveness that they have here. And so we ask questions like, are the correct metrics clear and known and followed by all? Clear, known for a minute until it changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
There probably is some sense of candor, but it's probably more underneath the leader, where it's like leader lashing, right? Because they're like, I can't believe we're changing visions again. So there's a lot of it's not necessarily great candor, but it could be a little bit toxic, if I could say, maybe that type of candor. Not afraid to ask for help. Yeah, I mean, they have to. You kind of have to ask for help in this type of culture to even survive and get it. But the problem is that if you ask for clarification on something in this type of culture, you have a high likelihood of that vision shifting again.
Exactly.
And then you're starting all over again. And so you could have a little bit of a fear there as well. Some higher points, though, and see something, say something. But this again goes down to they might not say it to the right people. Or if they do say it to the right people, they may not be listening and receiving it well. So all of those things in our chaos culture, we kind of laid out based on our scores of it, that it's about just under a 20%. If you go through the formula, it's just under a 20% likelihood of sustainable scalability. And I think as we talk through these and we give you another couple of examples here, you'll start to understand why it's only a 20% likelihood of scalability in some of these. So let's get on to foggy culture. Blake, what do we have here?
Yeah. And before I do want to say this. I think that we like when you're like, man, that sounds like a really far gap to have to develop from like just under 20%. Like, how do I get to even 70 to 80%? It doesn't take much. Like, honestly, it's looking at where you're weak and increasing and focusing on that area.
Yeah.
That's the power here. I don't want to just say, oh, you're 20% likely. And then people be like, well, that sucks. I'll never be able to do anything. When you look at the variables, that's why we're focusing on these variables. Increase variables a little, and you're going to see a huge jump. If you just give up because you're 20% likely to create, scalability, then you're missing the point. We're just trying to give standards so that you can do something with it. That's the whole point of this. It's not to give you data for data's sake. It's to give you data to say, I can make a difference by a small change like this. Okay.
Right.
So go ahead.
I was just saying, so for example, if we're looking at their environment and the chaos culture, right, we said the processes clear and followed, our coaching process in place was a really low score for what we would consider in this type of unscalable culture. If you just went from a 1 to a 2, if you just increased your coaching processes and you just had some clear processes that were a little bit more followed and accountable to follow, your scalability factor goes way up because it's a multiplier, right? Yep. And you want to take that multiplier and put some emphasis there as much as possible.
Yeah. And so that jumps to 40% in focusing on one area. That's a big jump.
Yeah. Big jump.
So foggy culture. Foggy culture is a lack of clarity. It's flat or confusing org chart, right? When I say flat, I mean like leader and then everyone else, right? There isn't a lot of dimension. There aren't a lot of leaders who are taking ownership of things. Processes are out there somewhere, but nobody really knows. It's like, we got to have processes because that's what businesses do. And then, okay, well, if the process isn't available, that's not helpful, right? No one knows where they're at. They're living in their origin story. So they had a really good call to action, call to start, and it's there, but it always feels ambiguous, right? They're always in transition and they're never actually accomplishing the thing that they're really going for. So it's really a foggy culture, other aspects that we kind of like talked about early on when we were trying to understand what kind of culture we'd call this was like people are confused. They don't know what the next step is. They don't know who's taking ownership. It's like things are lost in between processes too. And nobody, where someone says, "Hey, I did this. Did you pick it up?" No, because that's your responsibility. No, it's your responsibility. Do you see that there's that miss? And we always say that the biggest risk is in the transition. There's a lot of risk in the foggy culture.
Right. So again, just like all these unscalable cultures that we're going to be talking about in this and the next episode, there are those pros and cons, and it's no different here in the foggy culture. The pro of a foggy culture is you have a feeling of autonomy. If there's no one to answer to, or there's no clear accountability, there's no clear structure, you can kind of make up the rules as you go along. Yeah. Which, like, that's great, right? Because you can always win. Like, the goal of today is to get to a 3. Then all I got to do is get to a 3. And the goal of tomorrow is to get to a 2. Okay. The goal of the next day is to get to a 7. You make the rules as you go, right? Yep. So that's one of the pros there. There's lots of things being built. The leader feels in control. It's very organic feeling. You're like, just kind of whatever happens. Let's just let it happen. There's some open-mindedness and the sales team dream. So there's lots of pros there, I think, for us to consider with this foggy culture, right? Because a sales team would love to be able to go, I get to make up the rules as far as I go, right? That's the sales team dream. But the cons of it is that nothing's connected to what's being built. It goes slow, really quickly. The team feels like they're out of control. There's a lot of bottleneck, right? Yep. That comes with the lack of clarity and structure, which then leads to frustration and being held accountable. How come I have to be held accountable if sales isn't being held accountable, if operations isn't? There's all these different areas where it's like, how come? And no one knows the answer because no one's communicating it. Yeah. That's where it gets super foggy.
Yeah. And so when we jump into the people aspect as our start, I put them right in the middle, like a 5 almost. And do they have the right people? They probably do have a lot of the right people. But again, kind of that back to that origin story matter. You have a lot of the right people because they've innately been in the business for a while and they understand what their role is, how they connect to each other, still foggy. But like you maybe got the right people. Now, can they find the right people? Hell no. They can't, because now to replicate what is just innately understood from your OGs and your like legacy people, it isn't clear. So you don't know how to go find the right people because you don't even know who you're looking for from your talent perspective. Well, what do we need? Well, I promise sales is going to say sales. I promise ops is going to say ops. And I promise admin is going to be like, I need 4 more people in HR. Like there isn't a clarity because everyone thinks that their thing is the most important in that matter. Right. And if there isn't a leader who is clearly defining needs, we hit this problem. Turnover percentage probably going to be high again when there's a lack of clarity, like where there's a lack of vision, the people perish. This is that place. Okay. Yep. This is where the lack of clarity causes perishing. And the reason you maybe don't have a high level turnover on your upper management is, again, loyalty and legacy is all I can say.
So just to compare what we've already talked about in this chaos culture versus foggy culture, the chaos culture has lots of vision.
Yeah.
Very vocal about it, but it's constantly changing. Mm-hmm. Whereas if a foggy culture has lots of vision, it's super unclear what that vision is. Yep. If you ever had a meeting, I've had this meeting before, Blake, where I took my boss to lunch and I said, explain to me in 30 seconds or less what we're doing here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if they can't, then you go, this is what I'm talking about. This is why I'm frustrated. This is why I'm so confused, right? Because it's like, I don't even know what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Like I'm here for the paycheck, but that's not enough for me, right? Yep. Like I need to know the vision here. So then we get into the will, right? We get into the people being connected to the work. And we talked about that want, instinct, love, leverage kind of acronym for will. And most of this is pretty, mid as well on what we would consider their will of this overall thing. But their leverage, which is their natural capacity, actually pretty high here, because the ambiguity, again, we talked about this when we were describing this culture, the ambiguity of this foggy culture feeds a sense of autonomy. And so when you have a sense of autonomy, you kind of rise to the occasion or you get out. So the people that are still there have a high natural capacity. The leader can cause issues by not being clear on expectations, quickly disciplines without clarity, leads to some fear of action. It's probably where the high turnover rate comes in as well. But the people who are there, these people are high capacity people because they've had to figure it out for themselves. Mm-hmm. And they've obviously figured out something semi-right because they're still there, right? Mm-hmm. They haven't been let go of.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've read some article on LinkedIn that was like, autonomy is one of the most important things. And I agree wholeheartedly. But if you're like, oh, high leverage, great autonomy, look at like the love score here is super low. Like, and when people have a sense, not necessarily actual autonomy, because when the leader gets pissed off and responds that they did horrible, now they don't feel that autonomy was actually the thing that was supposed to be the case. So looking for true autonomy still has an element of boundaries and vision. And when you don't have that, the autonomy is just, I get to do what I want, not what is best for the company. Right. So that kind of is where I just want to be careful here that we're not like, yeah, autonomy is great. The autonomy is great.
Right. It's a sense of it.
The sense of it. Yeah, exactly.
It's a feeling of that. I want to put emphasis here that the foggy culture isn't necessarily a directive of autonomy.
Yep.
It's a sense or a feeling of autonomy. It's not really there.
Nope.
Because nothing's really there. It's like a mist, exactly. Right? We talked about, that's why we call it the foggy culture. You can't grab fog. You know, it's just in the way all the time.
Yep.
And that's what's happening here. So if we move on to the vision, are they clear on the vision? Again, pretty mid here, obviously pretty low on is it communicated? Mm-hmm. A little bit higher on it being exciting because this is common as well in kind of that early on startup. But for the most part, pretty low, actually. Really not even mid, pretty low. For us, we're giving it a 4 out of a 10 on vision because communication is low. It's not very lasting. It might be a little bit exciting, but obviously it's not very actionable or relevant because we don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
Right. So if you don't know what it is, it can't be very actionable or relevant. Right.
Yeah.
So get us into the environment here, Blake, and let's wrap up foggy culture.
Yeah. And I would say it's only exciting because of their origin story. They've said it so many times. They've connected to it. They brought heart to something that's been there, but it doesn't mean it's taking them to the future. Right.
Yeah, back when we got started.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're really good at the founder story, but they're not good at the next level.
Yeah.
But so our environment, again, we're pretty middle on this one, a 1.6. They're really not great at training people because, like, again, it's whatever is innate to the leader, and whether that passes on is pretty questionable. Do they see? Are there noticeable and understood opportunities for growth and development? Probably not.
Noticeable and understood is not something that words that I would use to describe
culture. Do their people feel connected to the team? Probably, but I wonder if that's just an aspect of time and not necessarily an aspect of clear connection. It's just we've been in the trenches for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. It's like that. The common enemy thing, but the common enemy might be the general who doesn't know what the hell they're doing, and they've had you in that trench for so long that now they become the enemy and not the enemy being the enemy, right? So there's some problems there. Is there a spirit of safety and positivity? Not really, because where things aren't clear and understood and boundaries aren't clear, you don't know how fast you should be going around a turn. And so you end up, in wrecks and other issues. So environment, pretty middle, but again, these are little things that could be done to increase this real easy by creating noticeable and understood opportunities. So what about accountable communication?
Yeah, I mean, not great here because when you think of communication just in general, when you're looking at a foggy culture, then obviously communication is pretty low. They got some higher scores from us on respectful candor and see something, say something, and really even not afraid to ask for help because they have to. They have to. But sustainable org chart, probably not going to last because it's super confusing. The metrics are clear, known, and followed by all. Nope. And do people know who they're accountable to and what for? Absolutely not. That's why we have a sense of autonomy. Is I can do whatever I want. I don't report to anybody, and whatever I feel like doing today, that's the best use of my time.
Yep.
Right. And so overall, their communication is a pretty low score from us. It's a 60%, which brings our overall score to about a 16% likelihood of sustainable scalability. Now, again, there's a lot of factors here. There's a lot of things that we can do to increase. Is there a spirit of safety and positivity? We said a 1. How long does it take to train people? We gave it a 1 out of a 3 as well. If you can just take those little environmental shifts and bring it up 1 notch, I mean, your multipliers are going through the roof, and your scalability goes through the roof with it, right? If you can just maybe get a little bit clearer in this foggy culture, get a little bit more clear on your communication, on your vision and communication, and just maybe set it to be a little bit more regular. That type of stuff gets noticed, and people start to go, "Oh, I see what we're doing here." You come out of that fog a little bit. You increase your likelihood of sustainable scalability.
And these are creating your growth, like your key growth focuses year over year. This year, guess what we're focusing on? We're focusing on clarity. Boom. Yeah. That's your theme for the year is clarity. Clarity in transitions, clarity in development, clarity in process, clarity in org chart. You just took one idea and you probably increased your scalability by like 40% by
Easily.
1 word.
Yeah. Easily. So we're going to get into this last one here in our last few minutes, what we call an unscalable culture type of a theater culture type. This is one that I feel like, again, everybody could resonate with, even if they're not in it. People know when they come home or they go out to the bar after work and they hear their coworkers, or they come home and they hear their spouse talking about different things, and it's just nonstop drama. That's what we're getting at here on theater culture. Theater culture thrives on drama. It gets bored without it. If there's not some big issue to solve, if there's not some big internal conflict, then we're bored with it and we're not really doing it. It's that busyness that we talk about. There's a lot of soft manipulation. It's all about accountability to the numbers. Over everything else. People last, numbers first. It's an appearance of success and hard work, but there's a lot of throwing people under the bus. Like I talked about earlier, their busyness to them is productivity. You just got to stay busy. I always equate the visual here of, if you ever watched Seinfeld, when George Costanza worked for the Yankees, he always said whenever his boss walked by his desk, all he had to do to look busy was to look really annoyed. He just had to go, and he looks really busy, and his boss is like, "George, you've been pulling some hard work here, and we're really proud of you." He had no idea what he was doing, but he's just like, and Jerry's like, "You're right, you do look busy when you do that." It's the same thing here. So the illustration is like stage and masks and actors and actresses and people like that who are putting on different faces at different times, right? The boss walks by, look busy, the boss leaves, whatever. And there's a lot of internal drama associated with the theater culture.
Yeah. So then that kind of takes us more. Are we hitting pros, cons first?
Yeah, let's get into that a little bit.
Pros. So they look great on the outside, very attractive. Hiring's actually pretty easy because they're obviously the theater knows how to market. Very similar. These people know how to market. They know how to have high level of attraction in some way or another. There's almost an element of fun that kind of guides that too, right? And guides them into their stages and into their hiring and into their work they do. There are a few people in your organization who get a ton done. They're comfortable with dramatic people, usually high profits and customer centric. Okay. Cons, most people get little done.
Yeah. If a few people get a lot done, most people get a little done, right?
Most people get little done.
Yeah.
There is effort hoarding, dysfunctional at the core, fear tactics from the top down, right? Not afraid to be vocal about things. A lot of your policies are very cover your ass kind of policies. They're not like good policies. And the real heroes of this kind of a culture, they eventually leave, which is
they're exhausted.
bummer. They're exhausted. They put in
carrying the weight.
Yep.
They're
So how does
exhausted
that
from
take us
carrying
to
the
our
weight.
people?
Yeah, so the people, right? They probably do initially have a lot of the right people. They're just burning through them, right? Can they find right people and quickly? Yeah, absolutely. Again, the problem is it's a revolving door because they're burning through them with all this drama, which makes their turnover percentage pretty high. So they're going to get a low score there. But this type of culture, more than any other, Blake, I think attracts people the most successfully because it's all a show. They've gotten really good at the show. They've gotten really good of the appearance of having lots of success and the appearance on the outside. It's one of those things where you're just like, this is going to be the greatest job I've ever taken in my life. And 6 months down the road, you're just like, God, help me get out of this.
Yeah.
Like, I can't, I don't want to go to work. I hate being there. I'm mad when I come home. It's a constant toxic. It's constant negativity. It's constant drama. I feel like I'm doing all the work, right? And so because of that, the turnover percentage is obviously pretty high, which means their score there would be pretty low. So for us, it was 6 out of 10, probably a very mid-level score on the people. The will, which again, want, instinct, love, and leverage, probably the highest here on leverage because of those 20% of the people that are kind of doing 80% of the work. Right, their natural capacity is pretty high, and then on the vision, it's unfortunately pretty poor. Yes, it's exciting, but it's not communicated. It's not very lasting. It's not actionable or relevant. But if they could just communicate this a little bit more, or if they could just make it a little bit more actionable and less about the drama, they could increase this vision score overall. And so for us, people, mid, but the will and the vision, pretty low here in the theater culture.
Right. And remember, it's all about facade. So of course they can attract the right people because they're attracting everyone. Of course they can get high level people in the right place because they're going through a big net, right? But it's a fake. And so why do people leave? Because their cognitive dissonance kicks into place and they're like, this isn't what you said it was going to be. And that's a problem because I want to be connected to the purpose that you told me, but the purpose you told me is not true. And I want to be connected to the work, but the work you told me isn't true. So we got problems. So that's why, of course, they're throwing a wide net. They hit the people, but they're not clear on the will and the vision. So their environment, takes us to the first multiplier, takes a long time to train people. There aren't noticeable and understood opportunities for growth and development because it's all come through the facade of what they're actually offering. And they're really, honestly, I'm kind of surprised that we even gave them a 1.5 when you look at the heart of it all, because there isn't a place of safety and positivity. Their processes aren't clear and followed. Their coaching process in place is nil. So honestly, I would even maybe rank their environment a little lower, but it's right in the middle based off what we have at this point.
Right. We're saying that do people feel connected to the team? We gave them a 2 out of a 3 because they feel connected by their dysfunction. Yeah. Right. It's that hoarder syndrome.
That's totally,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the hoarder syndrome of I know I live in the junk, but it's my junk.
That's right.
Right. Noticeable, understood for growth and opportunity. Yeah. For them, the way for growth and development and opportunities is to backstab people.
Yeah.
It's there. It's clear because it's worked in this culture. That's the problem with theater culture is manipulation and deception and backstabbing works. It works.
Yep.
And so you get those people that rise to the top. They don't have the natural capacity to stay there. Turnover.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Man,
so that brings us to the accountable communication, which again for us is a failing grade at 63%. But overall, we're looking at some key highlights here. Super low on respectful candor. They're more courteous than respectful. If you live in the South like me, it's a lot of bless your heart, right? Because, which if you don't know, in the South, that's not a compliment.
Yeah.
That is a knock. So sustainable org chart. Yeah. If people were willing to just be honest and open with each other, it could work. It could work because they have high talent. People know who they're accountable for and what for. Yeah, they do. And they're constantly dogging about it. See something, say something. Absolutely. There's tons of gossip here. They might just not be saying it to the right people. And so because of that, again, you can have some higher scores, but maybe not for the right reason. So because of that, for us, the accountable communications at a 63%. If you add everything up in our culture formula for the theater culture, they're going to end up with a 14.7% likelihood of sustainability, which again, if we just go back to that environment, this multiplier here on the environment is big deal. If you can just change that, it's not like, I got to, throw everything out and start over from scratch. If you could just change a little bit here, if we're looking at, is there a coaching process in place? Are there any clear processes followed by people? Is there real positivity or is it fake? You could just up those just by 1 point. In our formula here, and you're going to have a lot more likelihood of sustainable scalability. So that's our first 3 of the unscalable cultures that we're going to go through. Next week, we're going to go through 3 more, which are what we're calling careless, monopoly, and hustle. And already you might be thinking, oh yeah, I'm in one of those right now. So we'd love to have you back for that. Again, I want to remind you that you can go to theculturebase.com/strategy to talk to us about any of these situations that you're facing yourself, and we can help you build a scalable team that you need to get to where you're going. I think that's it for this week. We'll be back with you on next week's episode of the Culture Base Podcast.